So never mind, I am going to start. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. So this is being hosted by the Concerned Citizens Woodstock. We're a bipartisan group that has been working together for months, like really months and months. We were small groups, and then we all get together, and some people broke away because they had, lives. And we just kept going. But we all got together with the premise of we were trying to think of ways to support our town, and particularly increase revenue, look at ways to potentially provide some tax relief to those who would qualify for it. Should we really looking at amending Proposition 46? Should we look at repealing Proposition 46? And that's how we all got together. But before we actually start, we're calling it an informational educational session. We are being housed and welcomed by the Muddy Brook Fire Department, who are allowing us to use this community space today. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask if you would take a moment, maybe 15, 20 seconds, in memory of firefighter Paul Clear. He was a volunteer here as well as a career firefighter in the town of Webster. He recently passed moments after signing on to respond to an emergency call, doing his job, doing his duty. So if you would please join me for a moment of silence, I would appreciate it. Thank you. I guess the first thing that we have really wanted to do is some basic education on how Woodstock works, how the town government works, all the components to it. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend here, Sue Connor, who has been leading informational educational programs at the West Woodstock Library, where she's librarian also for months, just happened to be simultaneously just doing this.
Hello. So what I discovered from some patrons is that lots of people just don't know how town government works, and I didn't for many, many years either. I don't think it's something that we learn in school. We learn about national government, maybe the state. So it's a little primer. They gave me like 5 minutes. So if you know all this, just be patient. It won't take long. And if you want to follow along, I'm starting with the blue sheet. So we have the Selectmen, Board of Finance, town meeting form of government. So that means that the people decide on issues that affect the town. They elect officials and they vote on the budget. So we are the town meeting in those three parts of the government. So which is different than state or national, where it's all representative. They do their work and we decide if they did a good job and vote them in again. We actually participate in town government, or at least we have the option, right? We are one of the branches. So the officials that we elect, we'll start with the Board of Selectmen. There's 3 members. The Board of Finance, 6 members and 3 alternates. And the Board of Ed has 9 members. Those are the 3 boards that make financial decisions for the town. And in that, the first selectman is paid, is a full-time job. The other 2 selectmen meet twice a month, do lots of homework in between, and get a very small stipend for their work. And then everyone else is volunteer, completely volunteering to figure out the laws, and do lots of homework to make our government run. And below that is we have planning and zoning, town clerk, tax collector. All those people are elected officials in the town as well. So in talking with people, I realized there's some terms that are going around a lot in this conversation that you might not know. So here's our vocab list. We have the grand list. It's simply a list of all the properties in town and how much they're worth. We have the revaluation year. It happens every 5 years, and the town looks at what the current value of your property is. The assessment value is 70% of the actual value. So You're not being taxed on what Zillow says your house is worth today. It's 70% of what the assessor figured out during that reevaluation year. So then we have the mill rate. That's just a tax rate. And it's called a mill because a mill is equal to $1 of tax for each $1,000 of assessment. So like millimeter, it's 1/1000. The general government budget is the part of the town budget separate from the education budget. And the town budget is the budget for the whole town, general and education put together. And then we have the referendum, which is a vote by ballot on a question, such as to pass the budget each year or to change it. So then I'll go into the timeline, what happens with our budget every year. So in January, the assessor creates the grand list. Also in January, the budget requests from town offices and departments are due to the Board of Selectmen. So like I work at the library, so the library puts together what we need to run, and we send that to the Board of Selectmen. And then the budget request from the superintendent is due to the Board of Ed. And then all the departments in town, highway department is sending their request to the Board of Selectmen, town clerk, all those. February and March, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed present their budgets to the Board of Finance. Bring it all together. And then, with lots of work and back and forth, the proposed town budget is decided upon. And then in May, we have the town meeting. That's something that's scheduled every year, the first Tuesday in May. And the second Tuesday, we have the budget referendum, second Tuesday in May. And the voters must approve the budget. So if they don't approve it, then it has to go back to Board of Finance to be changed, brought to the voters again until it's approved. And the town does not have a budget until it is approved by the voters at referendum. It's always how it's been. That's just the form of government. It's how it always will be. We don't want it to go back and forth because coming up in June is the tax collector prints the tax bills, and July 1st is the start of the fiscal year. So as the Board of Finance is presenting a budget to the townspeople to approve, they want to present a budget that they think the townspeople will pass. So they're kind of balancing the requests they got from the different departments with what they think townspeople will approve. Because we don't want to delay it too much. That's what I have. You ready to go into particulars?
My turn? All right. Again, I use hands a lot, I move around a lot. But so what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is Proposition 46. But the first thing I'd like to talk about is a little bit of its history. So when I asked about it, I was told that it's Proposition 46 because the mill rate at the time was 46 mills, which sounds frightening. But I wanted to know, well, why was it 46 mills? And why did this group of citizens feel compelled to want to restrict it so it didn't increase anymore, or at least didn't increase catastrophically? After combing through some town meeting minutes from that time, I also had the opportunity to speak to somebody who had been part of the group that created Proposition 46, as well as another individual related to that, and they kind of gave me some perspective of what it was like at that time. It was stressful. There was not a lot of industry in town. Everything was on pretty much the backs of the residents. They were looking at a school project, a lot going on. However, in hindsight, now that we're 40 plus years out, one of the individuals told me that they didn't expect it to be here still. And if they had been able to see that it would be, they would have built in some sort of provision so it was reviewed every 5 to 10 years. The other individual said that at the time, they didn't have the level of state mandates that our town government and the Board of Education are required to comply with. EMS and fire service was very different. I don't think it was actually part of the budget at that point. I will defer to the woman who's shaking her head because I wasn't here. So needless to say, times have changed. It's not like I canvassed all of the members who had done that, but this is just a sampling of what I learned, which helped to tell me why this was in place. Is everybody here actually familiar with the ordinance? Yes, no? I can give you an overview, or I can read it. I'm going to try to do an overview. So basically what it is an ordinance that helps to more or less restrict spending for the town. So it doesn't limit how much revenue we have. It keeps our spending, our expenditures down, or to what they think is an acceptable level. But it is married to the grand list. The grand list being what Sue had just talked about as far as the total amount of value of property in town. If the grand list has a banner year, that's not a reval year, then we will have more wiggle room for spending. If it doesn't, we have very little wiggle room for spending. And unfortunately, where it's come to is it has not kept up with inflation in the past 10 years. I am gonna cite Mr. Mike Doherty, who's our Board of Finance Chair, who has assured me that if I misspeak, he will correct me. And I think Mike has said that over the past decade, if we had been able to keep up with inflation, we would have about $1.7 million more currently. Yes, he's shaking his head. Which means that we probably wouldn't be in this situation at the moment. So, where we are currently at the moment, I know from a personal perspective, I'm former chair of the Board of Ed and former Board of Ed member. We have had to reduce our staffing and services and programs pretty much every year. And now what we're facing in town is cutting further our town government services. They did, I think everybody knows the town hall was closed on a Friday a couple of years ago. It's only Monday through Thursday at the moment. That was obviously reduction there. But now we're looking at really needing to invest in our EMS services. Over the last 6 months, they have contributed more, so we have a full-time EMTs. Well, we need more money to be able to continue to do that. And to do that, we need about another $265,000 in the budget next year. But if we are not able to increase our spending that way to pay for EMS, that money will have to come from somewhere else in the general government budget that Sue talked about. So that is town hall staffing, DPW staffing, transfer station, recreation, libraries. So the money will have to come from somewhere.
Can we interject for a second?
Yes.
All right.
This is
So-
Reed. He's part of the group
How you
too.
doing? So just for those that aren't aware where the EMT part came in, if we didn't have people at the fire station on the hill, it just to staff the ambulance, you could be looking for an outside town to come and provide the rescue. And there were a number of times where EMTs were not available to take those calls. So to make sure we provide that service to the community, the fire association got together and said, this is what we can offer, but this is what we need to do. To be a paramedic or an EMT requires some certifications and licensing and then currency requirements. And if you're doing it volunteer and not making anything, it's hard to balance because you need to have a job to pay your bills. If you have a job, you can't be leaving it every 5 minutes to go take a fire call. So there's periods where we can't staff. So we made sure that we had one ambulance crew 24/7, 365. So we can provide that service to the community without having to pay an outside service to do that for us at a higher cost and a longer lead time. 45 minutes to respond to a heart attack, chances are they're not gonna be doing much by the time they get there. So that was a decision that was made locally, and now we gotta figure out how we can sustain that. Because once we pay a service or pay a crew, those members can't be volunteer anymore because of labor laws. It's out of our controls. If you're paid to do it, you can't volunteer additional hours, you have to be paid for hours worked. So it's a kind of a crutch we're stuck with at this moment.
So for full disclosure for Reed as well, he is now becoming an active member of the volunteer fire department, and I think it's partially because of what he has, learned of the community and wanted
Yes.
to get involved with
Yes.
this. So that's where he's coming from. In addition to that, I know So the town also needs to be able to pay the first, bill on the bond for the local bridge projects. I mean, we have some bridges in town that really need to be fixed. They have done all their research, they have gone out and acquired the funding, but now we have to start paying that loan. So when it comes to Proposition 46, currently where we are, and I will preface this as currently meaning probably today, because everything is in the middle of the budget cycle right now, so numbers are going to be changing. The Board of Finance will not receive the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen's budgets until March 14th. So those two entities are in the final stages of putting those together, so even those numbers aren't set yet. It looks like we have about $1.1 million under the Proposition 46 cap to spend between the general government and education. However, we need to pay our debt, that's about $267,000. Special education is one of the state mandates that is exempt under Proposition 46, so that increase in special education will need to be paid as well. That's about $561,000. And also transportation is another exemption under Proposition 46. That transportation increase is about $147,000. So once you take those three items out, what it really is about $125,500 that will be split between the general government and the Board of Education.
For an increase.
For an increase in both of those budgets. So if you remember what I had said earlier, I know EMS and fire service, and certainly we're in this firehouse, is important, and it is important in this community because that's what got a lot of people to come out to the initial town open forum. That amount will not cover the EMS increase that's needed for us to sustain our full-time EMTs. Another thing that has been pointed out to me, that if we do not keep our EMTs in-house, we do not continue to run this, it would probably cost the town another 10% more than it would be to keep it local. So if we don't fund it, it's not like it would be cheaper to go elsewhere to do it. So we are in a bit of a dilemma. So, Sue, you want to add?
Increases in other departments as well that we can do nothing about.
Absolutely. I certainly don't want to neglect the other town departments and the schools. I just thought that was kind of an easy thing. On the school side, again, the Board of Education is still working its budget together. But immediate concern that they have for the next fiscal year is they have been helping to pay for some staff using the COVID relief money that education entities received. That money was to help bolster reading and writing, particularly at the middle school, social worker, custodian. So that grant expires in June. So that money will not be there starting July 1st. I am going to cite old information, and I say old, beginning of this month. I know it doesn't seem like that long ago. But the Board of Ed is predicting that it may have to eliminate from 5 to 7 employees, staff members. Unfortunately, that to the point, and I can say this from experience, that is now and has been programs. And when the Board of Ed just went through its own budget this past week, it did a pretty pie chart, and it showed that about 6% of its overall budget is either not contractual or something that could be possibly eliminated. But in that pie chart, that 6%, and I'm gonna slowly go back to my notes, is tech services, licenses for all the software that they have in the schools, which also includes the books that are now downloaded into the iPads that the students use. Repairs, maintenance, custodial, office, and program supplies. It's not gonna be enough for them to just look at zeroing out those budgets, even though they have the needs. It's going to have to go into programs and services and employees. in order for them to be able to meet their budget cap under the current Proposition 46, how it's structured. And so, why we are here, meaning Jessica, Reed, myself, Amy, Sue, Mr. Green in the back, is what's on the orange sheet, if you did pick up. So the way we see it, there's three options that us, meaning the greater Woodstock community, has to consider. The first being, keep Proposition 46. You keep it as it is, have our elected officials figure it out. This is your guidelines, this is what you have to do. So we are telling you, no, you need to keep it. A concern that I have is for years, they've been doing that. And to the greater public, and even to some parents that go into the schools and meet with our wonderful teachers and find out their child is doing fairly well, they think everything is fine. Everything is just fine. And whenever I hear that, I don't know if everybody has seen the overused meme of the dog sitting in the middle of a fire and says everything is fine. And that's what I think of sometimes when I hear everything's good. So the second one is actually repeal Proposition 46. So this group did submit a petition asking for this to be on the referendum, to repeal it. So this would mean that as of July 1st, Proposition 46 would no longer exist. What it doesn't mean is that all of a sudden, the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen are gonna get everything they want. And I have to stress that, because the same way people who are very worried, and I can certainly respect that and understand that if Proposition 46 goes away, their taxes are gonna skyrocket. I don't want anybody who is for repealing Proposition 46 to all of a sudden think, we're good, we're getting everything. This is a gradual rebuilding of our town, meaning general government and Board of Education. It is not an open checkbook. To what Sue talked about earlier as far as the checks and balances in the town, the Board of Finance still has to put together its budget. When they receive their budgets from the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, it still has to come to us, all of us, to approve it, or to reject it until they get it right, and we think they get it right. So it is not an open checkbook, but it does allow us the opportunity to be able to tell the Board of Finance what we want as far as our town. The final option is actually something that came from the Board of Finance itself. So a member of the Board of Finance asked her fellow board members to consider amending Proposition 46. And what this amendment is to suspend, waive, moratorium, whatever word they end up wanting to use, for 1 year. So from July 1st of 2023 to June 30th of 2024, Proposition 46 would not be applied. This would allow the Board of Finance and the Boards of Ed and Selectmen to basically have a broader discussion about what are the actual needs of this town. And then the Board of Finance has the possibly stressful task, but that's what they signed up for, of compiling all that information and balancing out what Sue said, what can the town tolerate, and how do we actually start meeting some of the needs of these town services and educational services. Along with that, although you won't see it on the ballot, is a request that if this happens, a committee is put together with representatives from the Boards of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Education, as well as community stakeholders, to really take a step back and evaluate, do we need Proposition 46? Do we not need Proposition 46? Do we need a variation of Proposition 46? And how do we increase revenue in the town? What do our town services actually look like? What do our educational services actually look like? You've probably heard a lot about test scores going down, loss of employee, loss of staff, all that. It is true. I'm not proud of it because I was chair of the Board of Ed during some of this, but it is true. And the Board of Ed is starting to take some of those steps to really do a deep dive internal evaluation of how do they fix it. But how they fix it might require some funding. So this will have almost like a pause to be able to do that. So those are what we see as the options. Number 2, repeal Proposition 46 is going to be the first question on the ballot on March 9th. Amend Proposition 46 will be the second question on the ballot.
Suspend, not amend.
It actually says amend in the formal question. The amendment is to waive it.
Suspend, okay.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
It is
The
tricky.
ballot is very tricky this year, which is part of the educational piece too, because there's 2 questions about the same topic, which doesn't happen often, and ballot language can get kind of funky, so we're trying to make it as clear as possible.
Amy is being kind, ballot language is filled with legalese. So, what we can tell you is there are 3 questions on the ballot. You can vote yes for all of them, you can vote no for all of them, you can vote yes for some of them, no for some of them, but you can vote yes or no on all 3 questions. So please, when you get in there, remember that. The ballot will be structured that way. You'll say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And actually, to that point, I'm going to throw Jess in front of the group.
Can I say one thing first?
Sure.
Just to remind everyone that every other town in Connecticut functions without this spending cap. We're the only town that has this.
So she's throwing me up here. I am one of your registrar of voters. I take care of the database. It's really just a lot of data input, making sure that it is correct, what party you want to be affiliated with, that the address is correct, that your name is correct, that all of that is correct across all the state files. So I do have office hours, Monday and Wednesday, 8:30 to 11:30. If you have questions, feel free to come and see me at the town hall then. And my counterpart is there, and usually some other people helping us out. So with the ballot specifically, as Amy was saying, not only are they both the same on the same subject, but question number 2 references question number 1. So it says, if, and this isn't exact language, we don't have the exact language yet, but if question 1 fails, would you agree to a waiver for a year? Okay, so you can still vote on question 1 and question 2, please do. But if question 1 passes, what it is referring to and what the lawyers are saying we must refer to in this question structure on the ballot is that if question 1 passes, question 2 is moot. There's no 1-year waiver, there just doesn't need to be. Will there still be the research? Well, yeah, we hope so, we need it. As Megan said earlier, this is a rebuild. It's going to take a lot of time to figure out what we do want as a town. The people who put it in place took a lot of time to figure out what they wanted to put in place. None of this is easy. It's all about showing up for the meetings, asking the questions, having the conversations. So even if it is a full-out repeal, there will be work to be done. Amy will probably say later, if there's a full-out repeal, that's just the easiest first step. There's a lot
It really is.
of work to
I
be
will
done.
chime in my 2 cents shortly.
Yeah. There has been a lot of talk around absentee ballots, and some people are upset that they're not available yet. There is an entire process that got kicked off by the petition being submitted. And there is very specific timeline that goes with the process once a petition is submitted. Part of that timeline is the ballots being ordered, but there's a back and forth of figuring out the wording, and of course then question 2 came into play, so there's a back and forth of figuring out the wording for both of those. And yes, there is a 3rd question on the ballot, but then the wording goes and there is a back and forth of between the ballot printers and the town hall and making sure everything is exactly right and, I's are dotted, T's are crossed. So the ballots have been ordered. They should be arriving this week. We don't know exactly when yet. Snowstorms, supply chain problems, all those things we've been hearing and living with for years. So as soon as they are available, those of us in our group promise to do the work of getting the information out there. There is a question, I'm going to go there, about having a proxy pick it up for you. There is a form you can get from the Connecticut Secretary of State's website that will talk you through. It is very specifically for a referendum with less than 3 weeks lead time. And it talks you through, the form pretty much talks you through who could be your proxy, how you fill it out, how you send it to them. Because it is such a shortened timeline, our town clerk is not allowed to mail out anything. So, because she can't be responsible for it. So that is, when there's a longer lead time, there's more flexibility there. But she can't take that on and be responsible for it. Sue?
Just to clarify, the proxy is just to pick up your ballot package, not to actually vote for you.
Yes, and it says that. So there are all those instructions, but I'm just trying to give, I know she's had a lot of phone calls and emails because, again, shortened timelines, and this happens. The form exists because we're not the only town that does it in these quick timelines. So she can't mail anything out because, it's not, once it hits the US mail, it's something else. Yes?
So I read over the form, and it says no electronic signatures. Can you define what an electronic signature is?
Nowadays, you can sign a lot of things by typing it just in.
Okay.
It needs to be signed by pen.
Okay.
So by the person, in person,
So are
in pen.
they allowed to then scan it and email it and reprint it and bring it
That is
in?
something I am confirming.
No, I
Oh,
confirmed with
okay,
her.
good.
She needs the hard copy that
Okay.
you touch on paper.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the person who signs it, that actual copy that they touched a pen to is the copy that has to go into the town hall.
That's
Right?
where someone can bring it
So-
for you if you
Yes.
designate them.
Yes. So, so it is a little complicated. Again, I've got an email and a phone number at my office too, so send me the questions and I don't have a problem repeating myself and making sure we all get these details correct.
And just to support what Jess was talking about, the purple sheet that you all have does have the details that she was just reviewing, as well as the traditional go to the polls from noon to 8 on March 9th. So we tried to give you a cheat sheet for, because it's complicated.
And if you know somebody who has to leave town at 6 o'clock in the morning because of their job and doesn't know if they'll be back for 8 o'clock, try to have them walk into the town hall and do an absentee ballot right there with her beforehand. The other thing is that if they have to leave town at 11 o'clock in the morning for their job and don't get back till like 8 or 9 at night, you can vote by absentee ballot that morning. As soon as the town hall opens up at 8:30, you can go, Judy will hate me for that, but you can go in and fill out the form that morning up until noon. As of noon, you can't do that anymore, you have to come down and vote the regular way.
So the town hall is open late on Wednesdays
Yes.
still?
The hours are on the
Okay.
purple sheet.
So
Yes, it's,
can a
it is.
person go in on Wednesday, any Wednesday to do the absentee
From the day they have the ballots
Or will
available.
nobody be there?
From the day they have the
Yes.
ballots that they're available, and as long as somebody is in the town clerk's office.
Yeah.
So
Is somebody there?
Judy has to be there.
I'll confirm it for you,
Okay.
Norma, and I'll get back to you with that. All right, I think
Are we
that
gonna
is
hit
it.
question
because-
3 on the
Yeah,
ballot?
I'm
there's
getting
the
there.
third question, and I'm not taking that one, that goes to the education.
I'll do that one. But before I do get to this, I just want you guys to know, you all to know, that you are gonna start to hear numbers come out to the Board of Finance. The Board of Education for years has given the Board of Finance a budget that they think meets the needs to educate the children in our town. That's what their statutory responsibility is. It does not mean that it is a budget that would either be under the cap of Proposition 46 or that the Board of Finance would approve to go to the voters. Just so you know. The Board of Selectmen is going to be taking the same tack this year. And the reason that they're doing that is because they want Woodstock to see what is actually needed to be able to continue to operate the town. When I say town in this sense, I mean schools and general government. So the budgets that are most likely going to be presented to the Board of Finance on March 14th are definitely going to be higher than what Proposition 46 would allow. But also, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn with this one, Mike, that the Board of Finance would actually pass on to voters. Because they have the statutory responsibility, which Mike and I had conflicts sometimes. They are responsible to make sure that the budget that is sent to the voters is a responsible budget. Reasonable or responsible?
Reasonable and responsible.
Okay. So
So
Hence-
just to
hence the tension.
piggyback off that for a moment.
Yep,
To clarify, in case you're arguing
Absolutely.
that, the Board of Ed submits a budget that usually has to be hacked up tremendously.
absolutely.
The Board of Selectmen try to make the cuts before
Before they
they
go to the
present
Board of
their
Finance.
budget to avoid that process, because they're trying to run the town. In the past, they've done that. So they get their requests, and they go through that budget request, and they chop out already before it's submitted, normally. This year, because of just the financial climate, they are submitting the budget as requested from the department heads. They know that it is not going to be at all passed at that rate, but they want it publicly on the record for the Board of Finance and for the citizens to know what that number is for optimal operation. They know it's not gonna pass. So don't freak out when you see the general government budget. Cause the request came in at like 14.7% increase, which is nowhere near they're ever gonna be, but because that number was so big, they want everyone to see what is the ideal number for operating the way that the town would want to be run.
And there's an asterisk in what Amy said, so within that is the money for EMS services and to pay the first, bridge loan bill.
It's the ideal number.
Yeah, so it's
Don't
not, you know, everybody's getting full-time employees. and
You have to
everyone's
remember
getting
that it took 20 years of little tiny cuts every year and losing a little bit every year to get us where we're at. So like they said earlier, I'm gonna say, dealing with the prop issue, however it comes out, is the first step. Getting people educated and involved and figuring out what the town wants to do surrounding Prop 46 is the first step. And it's actually the easiest step, and it's proven to be very challenging. Because it's going to be 10 years of everybody staying engaged, telling the town what they want, and participating in the budget votes if Prop 46 is repealed, because that's how you control it. Prop 46 has allowed everybody to like kind of say, I don't have to do a budget vote because it's only gonna go up X amount and I feel safe. If it is repealed, it is a community process where everybody needs to stay educated and involved and vote and tell the town what has to happen.
So we have to do our part, essentially. So what Jess was talking about, when you do see your ballot, and while this committee is not focused on this, we would be remiss if we didn't explain it, is a question that is asking for taxpayers to approve spending about $215,000 from what's called this capital non-reoccurring fund to pay the capital assessment fee for Woodstock Academy. It is loosely related to Proposition 46, but nothing to do with the exact ordinance. So this will be the fourth year that the town has had to consider this process. I think that the first and the third year, it was approved by taxpayers. The second year was our COVID year, and the state rules changed, so our Board of Finance considered it and approved it then. But the reason why it's coming out of the fund called capital non-reoccurring is so it doesn't get directly taken from our K to 8 budget. So I gotta repeat that. So if number 3 fails, then sometime after March 9th, our Board of Education in the current year, the year that the school year is in right now, is going to have to find a way to reduce its budget by about $215,000, according to Mike.
Oh.
And
The Board of Ed might argue that, but that is most likely what's gonna happen. To me, that actually makes me nervous, like really nervous. I don't know how the Board of Education is going to do that.
And Megan, just to make a point though,
Yeah.
they're already over budget or anticipating to be over
Yep.
budget because of the utility increases. Fuel oil's gone up, transportation's gone up because of fuel costs for the buses. You know, so all of their costs have already expanded, so they've already reported to the Board of Finance, which is their statutory requirement to forecast and say, I think we're gonna be over, and by how much? What was that number? It was
But
Yeah,
again,
it's
numbers
not
changed. This, I know that the business manager at the Board of Education has said that she is doing her best effort to reduce this, but this is what they had to report to the Board of Finance. It's roughly $300,000. But she has told the Board of Finance that it will most likely not be that way. Things are still in flux because some of that money is also related to special services necessary for students, and those might change as well.
The only point I'm making is they're already trying to find a way down, and then if this gets added to it, it's a larger amount they're trying to find down. Out of what you already said, is only a 6% that they can really manipulate. So,
Well, without going to employees and
Right.
programs.
And question 3 is it's almost as energized as Prop 46 in this
Absolutely.
town with the academy. There are state mandates. First of all, we're one of very few towns that doesn't have a public high school. So because we don't have our own public high school, there are state requirements that say we have to pay whatever ascending school asks for our students to go to a high school, right? So we have to pay what the academy asks one way or the other. The town was trying to maneuver the funds so it wouldn't impact the K-8 budget as much, but we can't change that number. And it is a comparative number to other school prices. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think that our paying the academy is different than other towns. It's not. They had a tuition fee, and that's what they charge for students for sending towns, and it's the same cost for us as it is for Brooklyn and Pomfret. They just pay for it differently. We've broken it out differently.
And I do have to add, because in order to spend money from capital non-recurring or CNR, it has to be a capital expense. It can't be operational. And it has to be a capital expense if the town wants to spend money out of it as well. The town has used CNR money to, in the recent years, for tree removal. It's necessary. This has been challenged. This has been reviewed multiple times by our town attorney and town auditor, because it has been challenged multiple times about whether it's an appropriate use of money this way. And our town auditor has said that if Woodstock had its own high school, it is reasonable to assume that we would have to actually keep up with the capital costs. So 95% of our children go to high school at Woodstock Academy. So that is how this was broken out. If you would like to know more of the history, because I really don't want to bog everybody down, it's already 2:45, come on up after and I'm happy to share it with you. But if there is any takeaway or anything you take home from this, just know that while the first 2 questions on the ballot affect Woodstock's future, the third question affects it immediately, and it is the schools. I can, hold on, let me check my agenda.
I think we're good.
We're good. So now, this is the question and answer period, unless you need to,
Well,
is it a question
can you
or?
speak to the fire department?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to include
Oh,
that, yes.
I do, I would get in trouble if I went home if I did not
I
say
was gonna ask
this.
a question anyway.
So as far as well, I just mentioned the future. As far as fire department goes, I mean, obviously, we're now to a point where we do need to pay for full-time EMTs. Our volunteers are diminishing despite Reed's best effort.
anybody else wants to
Yay!
Got one right in the front row here.
Here we go, another one too, we'll grab you as you're leaving, or Amanda will grab you as you're
You
leaving.
betcha.
But our fire departments. So in addition to EMTs, we actually need firefighters. So when you have a fire, like what happened up on Brickyard Road, right? You need firefighters who can actually respond if you need them to be able to go inside the building. But that volunteer base is diminishing as well. So what I have been told, and I am going to source people other than my husband, is that Woodstock really is about 1 to 5 years away from seriously needing to consider some paid firefighters. Under the current Proposition 46 structure, that cannot happen without, and this is my editorial perspective, decimating some of the other general government services. Because we would have to pay for that. So in addition to just planning for the future and looking at tax relief, looking at economic development, we really need to plan for this because our volunteer base is diminishing. So we need our fire departments and our Board of Finance and our Volunteer Fire Association needs this opportunity. And I would like to know that if something should happen at my house, you know, that I'm not waiting for, now I will throw my husband under the bus for this one, him to come be on his way home from work, to be able to get here, to be able to go because he doesn't work in town.
And from the, like, 4 days of experience I have, I've noticed that the qualified firefighters are also professional firefighters at other districts. So as that group gets smaller, you know, we've got some other folks here that have been in the community forever and ever. That are the ones that I've seen all week at every single call. And there's been a couple times where there's a second call, because there's not enough people to staff a truck. And that's where you gotta be concerned during the day. More people home in the evening, we can get there. But it's something that, you know, folks that are in the business, are very concerned that, you know, that ability to respond is gonna be in jeopardy.
Let me put that in perspective. Last year, Muddy Brook had 269 calls. I'm not the youngest person around anymore. I responded to 215 of those. At 70 years old, I can't keep on doing that every year. It just doesn't work. I mean, I used to be a firefighter one, I used to be an EMT. I can't do that anymore. I've forgotten more than I can remember. And usually during the day, the four of us who respond, the average age is 68. So you know, put that in perspective. We can roll a truck. If we have one interior person, we're hoping Bungie or the Hill has another one or two, so we can get them together to go into the building. Otherwise, if you don't have 4 firefighters present, you cannot put 2 people in and 2 people outside. So, and that's why you see us going, in the last 2 years, we now respond to each of the other departments in town, their calls also. It's not gonna last very much longer.
Thank
So
you.
what Megan
Thank
is
you,
saying.
I'm sorry, Mr. Weatherall had his.
So what Peter left out of that is any weekday, daytime, you get 3 times the senior citizens instead of 1/3. That's what that boils down to.
Mhm.
That is at best a Band-Aid, at best,
So the need is there.
absolutely.
I was going to ask, I heard through the grapevine that the state will start mandating fire departments to have paid,
I cannot answer that. I would either ask Amanda, I know Mike is the past chief, or any of the firefighters here who might know, so I don't know that.
I heard.
With the increase in state mandates over the years, it's not a foreseen thing, because it's part of why we got here, right? The state has said you
Yeah.
have to, you have to, you have to, you have to. Now they're doing it with EMS, it's foreseeable, very foreseeable that they're gonna do it with fire, because it's something that every community
We did
needs.
hear, yeah, within a
Yeah.
couple of years.
I
It's
would
not a
need to
current
confirm
mandate as to how that is done.
Right.
The town has a responsibility to provide fire service, but if in fact you have a volunteer fire department within your town,
Mhm.
that meets the minimum standard.
But that's the same with EMTs right now. You're required to provide the service, you're not required to pay them. But we saw how that went,
Correct.
so.
Megan, what is the actual number to run the ambulance for the year? It's not the 265.
No, that's in addition, I think
Yes, I
it's
know, and I don't think people
440,
understand that.
477, 447?
The current cost
Yeah,
is $215,240.
that's what's currently in the budget.
That's what's currently in the town budget for
Yeah.
the ambulance. And that was to cover 108 hours per week.
Right,
That's
what
it.
I'm
July
saying.
1st.
But it's not what's needed to
No,
cover.
that's
Correct.
what I'm saying, because money
The-
was taken from one account to
Yes.
cover.
Yeah.
It
No,
isn't the
no,
No, no.
let me finish,
Hold
let
on.
me finish.
That's what was already in.
That's what was already in there.
Yeah.
Then December 3rd, they went to a 24-hour coverage.
Yep.
168 hours per week. That boosted the cost up. And Woodstock EMS is taking money that was put aside for the purchase of a new ambulance
Yep.
to pay that from now till June 30.
That's my.
Come June 30, if in fact Woodstock EMS does not get fully funded,
Mhm.
they will be out of business.
Yep.
The town will have to get someone else to provide ambulance service.
At about 10% more.
At a minimum of 10% more. That was a year and a half ago's
Okay.
estimate. Was gonna be 10% more. But the additional amount this year that they're asking to be added to the budget is $262,614.
Yep.
Which would be a total cost of $477,854.
All right, so I remembered the first three numbers, Mike. I remember the first three numbers.
And the minimum cost we have right now, that was given to us, again, as I say, a year and a half ago, was $525,600.
That's if we outsource.
And we're not trying to get anybody to move out of Woodstock, but we do want you to get engaged in the process so we can make that corner.
But that's my point,
That's
is that
really-
I don't think people understand, it's not $265,000, it's much more than that, and plus, they've used money from another account, which was for a new ambulance, that money
So
is,
part of
where's that gonna
the
come from?
purpose of these informational sessions is for us to share what we know, the conclusions that we've drawn. But really the important thing, kind of those next steps, is for the people in this room, if you want more information, to ask for it. If we meaning the concerned citizens, if we don't know it, we can at least put you in contact with a town official that might. But also that you go talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family, to explain a little bit of what Norma was just asking us about.
And encourage them to educate themselves, you know what I mean? Like, us 12 people are working on, let's educate, that's the important thing. Each one of these groups, if you guys go out and say, hey, I learned this, or you should learn this, or look into this, do whatever, then the education grows.
Or did you know? And then if they have a question, that the question's followed up.
And can I just,
Hold on one second, Peter.
So just to be clear with question 3,
Okay.
that would be an approximate $500,000 that would need to be cut before the end of the school year, this current year. As
That,
what the numbers we're going off of right now.
yeah, I
Possible
will,
maximum.
I will stress that they are numbers right now,
Yeah.
and the business manager has said that they will most likely, at least the initial notification to the Board of Finance,
Yeah.
will most likely be reduced. So I don't wanna scare the bejesus out of everybody here.
And historically, at the end of the year, the Board of Education does find pretty significant reductions with the end of the year inflows. There are adjustments made at the end of every year, so you really can't hang your hat on those numbers,
Yeah.
but you can hang your hat on the Woodstock Academy assessment number.
And I will say, a lot of those found money at the end of the year is because the Board of Ed didn't have to pay as much for diesel, or it didn't have to pay as much for heating oil. And those are, that opportunity is gone at the moment. Hold on one second, let me just go there.
I just wanna speak on behalf of the schools, and if, you know, I'm not telling you how to feel or vote, but if budget is reduced, I don't know if you know how the schools are running right now. We are running bare minimum. Our supply closets have no pencils. We have multiple staff, myself included, that are, assigned 5 children, 5 special ed children to 1 paraprofessional. Personally, I have 2 heavy-duty medical students as well, so the moment that a medical issue arises, my attention goes to those 2 students. The other 3 are on their own. You reduce budgets and you're talking 7 to 10 kids per adult, we're failing our kids. I can't give enough of myself to those children.
And these are special education children?
These are all special education children. There are 5-ish people, maybe more, I don't know. Other educators in the room could speak on behalf that have 5 or more children this year. It's
And one thing that
not good.
Sue whispered into my ear that I really feel bad because I feel like I'm just piling on, but another revenue thing that I neglected to mention is there's something called the Education Cost Sharing Grant. That is our most significant grant from the state of Connecticut for education. the state, prior to COVID, reevaluated how that money is distributed. And some of the ways that it looked at it was basically the ability for the community to fund their schools. So they looked at everything from free and reduced lunch, median income, a bunch of things that I honestly can't remember, but it was a lot of stuff. And so when they looked across the state, some towns had reductions in their grants, some towns had increases in their grants. So Woodstock is one of the communities that will have a reduction. So in the next fiscal year, we will receive $128,000 less in ECS money than we currently do. Over the next 9 years, 8 years I think, we will receive about $900,000 less in education money.
That year.
That year.
That year.
That year. So
And
in
the
year
current
9,
year.
we'll be, that we compared to this year, we receive $900,000 less. So it is it's
It's incremental.
a much larger number
And
incrementally.
this comes from the superintendent's presentation that he did at the first, special town meeting. He's got a chart in there that shows each year what that next level reduction is. And it's really a comparison of what we pay in taxes versus what our income level in the town is. And we're one of the higher towns in the state, but one of the lowest in the state for how much we spend.
Actually, we're
Wyndham
pretty much
County.
comfortably right in the middle of the state with what Woodstock can afford, but basically what the state has told us is you can afford more. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I've asked our state officials, we can't, can you help us? And they haven't said it like this, because this would be kind of rude, but they did say it's a you problem. Woodstock has elected to do this, you've chosen to do this. If you wanna change it, you have to figure out a way to change it.
And
We're looking at all the state indicators and all that, what the municipality can afford, and you can afford to pay more, therefore we're reducing, our ECS money.
And that same evaluation is done on a lot of state grants.
Right, so there are some state grants, I know a grant writer was proposed, it sounds like an awesome idea, if you know anybody who wants to write grants for the town or the schools, and they just wanna be paid out of those grants and they can find them, fabulous. I'm obviously not a town official, so I can't hire you, but I can tell you also from experience that Woodstock isn't eligible for some of those grants because of how much, and as far as these indicators say, we can afford. So I can only speak to the education side, our business manager does look for grants. And then when she gets down to the point where it basically says who's eligible, Woodstock isn't eligible. And I have been told that it's similar on the town side, and I've been told it's similar in the fire departments as well. So, again, I hate to keep piling on, but I'm hoping that you take away anything, is that really something needs to be done. I mean, probably, in my opinion, something needed to be done a few years ago, but it really needs to be done now. And I realize that we've kept you for almost an hour here, but we don't want you to walk out of here. If you have questions for us, you can ask now, you can ask the end, and I see you, Joey.
So my question, Woodstock Academy capital assessment fee,
Yes,
what exactly is that? Is that for special project? What is that exactly for?
so I am not on the Board of Ed anymore, and I did not attend that Board of Finance meeting. So I haven't read the letter that went to the Board of Finance, but the Woodstock Academy does have to tell the Board of Education and the Board of Finance what that capital project is. Because it cannot be to pay their maintenance staff. It can't be to, operations or anything like that. It has to be a capital.
Okay,
Thing.
so in the past,
So the first 2 years, for example, were for new roofs
roof.
and to
Fuel
remove
tank,
oil
right?
tanks.
So could I assume, or could we assume, that if the Woodstock Elementary School or the middle school needed a capital improvement, that we would vote to take that out of the non-occurring fund and not the K through 8? Could I assume that that would happen?
You can assume we could make the request.
Shouldn't it?
But it doesn't necessarily mean that it would come from there. We have a 5-year capital plan, and I also, out of the corner of my eye, see Mike Doherty raising his hand. He was actually like waving it a little bit, so I'll let him answer that one.
The town is currently paying, on the,
Elementary
we
roofs.
have a, current debt service.
Yep.
That's, $297,612, I believe it is this year.
I'm gonna check.
But that is going towards
The roofs.
payment on the roof project that was done at the school. And yes, the town does pay for that because, in fact, the town, not the Board of Education,
Owns the building.
owns those buildings. So they are ours to maintain.
Good
Also,
question, I like it.
to clarify, that's not on top of the tuition. It is technically, but still all together with that, plus what we've paid for tuition, it equals what other sending towns pay.
So Woodstock is different because of how it's paid because of Proposition 46. This fee is assessed to every student at Woodstock Academy, whether you're an ascending town or you're a tuition-paying day student or a tuition-paying boarding student. The other ascending towns, at least for the first couple of years of this, because please know that I have been removed for a couple of years. The Board of Selectmen just transferred that money to those towns' Board of Education to pay for that capital assessment fee. Woodstock is different. So this is the process that we have to follow in order to be able to pay that fee. And I didn't mean to silence everybody, so.
Are there any other
Does anybody have any
questions?
other questions? And again, if you're not comfortable asking in public, please come find one of us. We don't want you to leave here going, well, if you leave here wondering, oh, I should have, we do have contact information that we can give you so you can always follow up.
With Woodstock being private, though, the academy, none of that building or anything is owned by the town, like with the K-8, correct?
So the academy is not private, it's an independent
Yeah.
school. If it was a private school, we wouldn't be able to send our children there.
Okay.
But no, the town of Woodstock does not own any of that property. It is owned by the Woodstock Academy, I believe probably their association.
So do the other towns that send students there participate in this, replacing the roof and stuff like that?
Yes.
They're all required to pay the same
Everybody.
amount?
It is
Okay.
a fee assessed to every student, and so if you live in Pomfret, or Eastford, or Union, or Canterbury, all of those students also have that fee associated with them as well.
Okay.
It's not a unique fee that they just make Woodstock pay. It is
We
across
just
every
pay it
student.
differently.
We just pay it differently.
Itemize it for us,
Yeah,
or is everybody else pays it in whole?
okay.
So no, they aren't just nailing us with this, they're not just putting it on us.
I have a quick question. As far as the budget percentage money, 80% goes to Board of Ed?
So I was corrected yesterday. After, it is 78.3. 0.35.
So is that like mandated you get that percentage, or that's what
It is
you
not
need?
it is not mandated.
Okay.
So when the Board of Finance goes through the budgets, they look at how much is needed to fund education and how much is needed to fund the general government budget. And that's how they separate it out. There have been some years the Board of Education has received 100%. There have been some years that the Board of Education has received 70 or 75. It's currently at 78.35%. But no, it's not mandated. And the Board of Finance also, when they have to evaluate how much needs to be reduced from general government and Board of Education as far as the budgets go, they look at how much the board, should the Board of Ed take 100% of that cut? Should the general government take 100% of that cut? Should it be 50-50? They take that into consideration when they make that decision. Yes?
The meeting that was at the Grange, how well attended was that?
About the same.
About the same.
Yeah.
But what's nice is none of you guys were there.
Right.
So we're actually getting,
Our plan is working!
that did not come out the way it should have come out. No, it is nice. It is not, I made you laugh though. It's nice to see different people. And that was the purpose of us holding these informational sessions in different places. We are trying to reach different people in the different sections of town.
At different times.
At different
so we can
times of
get
the day.
everything scheduled.
So,
We spoke about gathering information, sharing it with people that we know. I can't get over the fact that there's 3,800 voters in Woodstock, and a good turnout is 26%.
Yes.
So 800 and some people decide the entire fate of this town. That's ridiculous.
And that's why I said
Totally ridiculous.
education and participation, and fixing this is going to take the whole town being involved for the long haul. It's not gonna get any better until that changes. It's a very community-based problem as well as a town financial problem.
I think,
Oh.
I'm trying to keep track of
This has
hands.
nothing to do with education.
Good.
Has to do with the transfer station.
Okay.
How
I
does
can
that
try-
get paid? Because that's a huge bill. How does that?
So I am definitely kicking that to the back corner
that's
of the
my-
room,
yeah, how
because
does-
that I am not educated on myself.
How does that work?
The majority of it is paid by the fees that people pay for their stickers every year.
Yeah,
And we also have a small number of people that we allow first come, first served basis from the town of Pomfret to use our transfer station. They pay a higher rate than the Woodstock people do. And then the remainder of that, unfortunately, has to come out of the general government budget.
That number has gotten smaller.
It has,
They
yes.
are working towards self-funding, that's a like, it's decreased significantly, and they're getting closer to it being self-funded.
is it not 200 and some odd thousand a year
I don't
ago?
know what it is.
Right around that, yeah.
That's a lot, I just wondered where,
Well, the thing is, it used to be, most of the trash that went there, ended up being recycled, so we were paid for that.
okay.
And there were customers out there who wanted that material to recycle it. And unfortunately, that market has bottomed out.
The only item we get paid for by the town now is cardboard.
Yeah.
Everything else, we
Yeah.
do not get any money
And,
back on.
and only corrugated cardboard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I actually have that. Oh, wait, hold on, I actually have that number, I'm surprising myself.
Scrap metal, yeah.
So for the current fiscal year's budget, the whole budget for the transfer station, and I'm gonna give it number by number, Mike, is $274,987.
Wow.
That's the,
Whole cost.
yes.
And about
How much
two,
revenue is from,
Oh, now you're asking me like.
about
Well, that's
200,000 of that is actually from stickers.
Hold on, you can't see. That is not in the,
It's probably not included there.
no, it's not, it's
so
on
if
the
it costs
revenue side.
270, we make 200 on stickers that cost the town 80,000 dollars a year.
Right.
So it's like I said, it's gonna.
It was almost twice that at one time.
Are we legally allowed to be at the town hall to provide information?
What do you mean by that?
Like, if people have questions, particularly what does
Can't
the
be within
stuff
75 feet of the
Right.
polling space.
On the day of on the referendum.
mean? Yep,
No, there are strict rules. You have to be within you cannot be within 75 feet. If you have a question as an individual for the town clerk, or the finance director, or the first selectman, you can absolutely go to town hall and ask.
okay.
But you can't, advocate a position on the referendum or distribute material inside the town hall.
Okay, I thought it was just if it was guiding you towards one way or other. You can't just provide information. So you couldn't be there handing out the school budget.
Outside of, well,
The town
no,
hall.
the school budget's different.
That's public
That's
record.
public record. and
That's
that
already
is-
provided by the town on the website, all of the stuff.
But
like
so
the
we
public record
can't,
is
we
accessible.
can't go into town hall
You
and
can't
stand
hand
at
out
the door and
this
say
stuff.
here, here, and here.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But we are creating a website where these 5 documents will be available, and it might be ready tonight, we'll see.
Okay.
We have a
I'm
monitor
sure
on
that
it
it
right
would
now.
be ready tonight if it was me. Does anybody else have a question? I mean, there's been,
What
you know,
would the name of that website be?
I'm gonna leave that up. She knows that more than I do.
Concerned citizens of Woodstock.
As I say, if you wanna be on our,
Yeah, I'm on
information,
there.
just make, if anybody wants to be more directly connected to our information list, sign up here before you leave. I was standing up in part because I wanted to circle back to Norma's question to me, because it was striking me differently as listening to Megan talk about things, about, if absentee ballots would be available throughout the Wednesday where there's extended hours at the town hall. One of the things that people in the discussions around all of this that I've been hearing, people are saying, well, I have to do financial gymnastics with my own budget, so should the town. The town has been doing financial gymnastics with the town budget for a very long time now. And why this made me think of it is shortening to 4 days a week, having one day with longer hours. The way the town hall operates is you can't walk in and do your laundry list of
It's
visiting
not
4
one-stop
different
shopping.
offices. Because the only way to afford to have all those people paid or, for their hours and to staff all those offices and all those positions, because they have to be experts at what they're working at, they have to be trained. They can't work full-time, they can't be there all at the same time. So Judy has to be paid. I don't know what Judy's
That's what I was
hours are,
wondering,
right, exactly,
If
so.
you can actually go during those hours.
Exactly, because
instead
are
to-
the town clerks, because that costs money, to have each office open costs money. And in order to make our town hall open the hours it is open, they have played this beautiful game of,
But that's something that we
Chess.
can go ask and even ask them to post on their website
Yes.
what the hours of the clerk will be before the referendum.
And I will check with her, if you're on our email list, that'll be something that comes out.
I already
That's a
put it
good
in my notes,
question.
I'll get to you.
So Reed's whispering into my ear as well. All these points that I remembered yesterday, I'm not remembering now. And again, Mike can back me up on this or correct me. So, one of the other key things related to how Proposition 46 isn't necessarily working with us right now. I had mentioned way back in the beginning of the hour that we can certainly generate more revenue, but can't necessarily spend it. A personal experience, a few years ago when the Board of Ed was looking at some other deep cuts, we were trying to brainstorm revenue generation, and one of it was to invite students from other towns to attend our K-8. We would be able to charge them a tuition fee, which would allow us, in theory, to be able to bring back some programs, hire some more staff. And we were told that'd be great, generate that revenue. It doesn't mean you're going to get it, because it's spending that caps, that Proposition 46 caps. So that revenue would go into our general fund. It wouldn't necessarily go into schools. And during the second open forum, when someone had brought up economic development, Mike had pointed out that, say, a marijuana growing facility should locate in Woodstock. Well, if it does in a current structure, the grand list isn't going to go up much. So, that growing facility might come with a lot of fees that the state requires it pay municipality. Well, those fees, that revenue, will also go into our general fund. But it wouldn't necessarily be able to go to our town hall to be spent. And because that facility is coming into a structure that already exists, so maybe Orange Art or the rest of the old Crabtree and Evelyn facility, our grand list isn't going to go up by very much. And the grand list is what helps to guide spending under Proposition 46. So we can have all these different unique ideas as far as how to generate revenue, trying to keep Woodstock as Woodstock, right? Not have a big mill or industry come here. I'm not a planning and zoning, but I can say that way back in the day, I did see the map of the state of Connecticut when it comes to its development and conservation, and we are solidly in the conservation area. So we're not in a let's do massive development in Woodstock. And we also have our Planning and Zoning Commission that is trying to skillfully manage that as well. Did I get it, Reed?
Yes, and just want to make that point, because eliminating Prop 46 allows the voters to then put that onus on the Board of Selectmen to find those revenue streams to offset taxes.
And the Board of Ed.
And the Board of Ed, but right now, it's really not any incentive to go ahead and do that
It's
because
actually prohibited development because.
it's gonna limit what we can do, so.
Did you?
Yeah,
I don't know if you're
actually,
stretching
just
or-
a quick question, who determines and how, the mill rate, who determines what the mill rate is?
So after we, the collective we in the town, approve a budget, the Board of Finance sets the mill rate. So that meeting usually happens, sometimes it happens literally within, minutes after the results of the referendum are given. If you want the particulars on how they go about doing that, I'm gonna send you back to the corner again, to the chairman of the Board of Finance.
Mike, you might as well, you know.
Generally, if the budget passes, probably within a half an hour to an hour, as soon as we get the results.
Yep.
And we're told that the budget passed, we will already have a mill rate in mind, and we will vote to set that mill rate. If in fact there is no approval on the budget,
Yep.
we could still,
Set a mill rate.
that night, set a mill rate so that we can send tax bills out and have revenue coming in.
Yes. Yep.
And down the road, it could help or it could hurt, because if we don't set it high enough, then we're gonna have a shortfall on the government side.
Yep.
If it comes in extra, then basically what would happen is that those extra funds would go into the general government fund, and then they would go towards reducing the taxes the following
In
year.
the future year. It is a process. I know we've talked a lot about the process part. That the Board of Finance does need to be methodical in its thought and following. We don't get to set the mill rate. That's their job. We tell them how much, we tell the town how much it can spend.
Whatever you're willing to spend, and then we have to look at what our revenue is.
Yep.
And balance that out and determine the mill rate.
And I can say, in the past, there were 3 years where the Board of Finance did use money from the general reserve and general fund to make it so we, the taxpayers, did not have an increase in our mill rate, our tax rate, despite the budget going up. You know, one of those years, they did this because it was the COVID year and they didn't know what everything would look like, so they didn't want to add the additional stress to the residents.
So just a side note, I'm the recording secretary for the town, so I sit and watch all of these meetings from the peanut gallery and take notes, so I see a lot. And I've heard over and over and over again from the Board of Finance that they know even if stuff is approved or, you know, a prop is repealed, that they're still not willing to bring a budget above 1.2 or like whatever it is, the percentage rate. So they know, from my point of view, after watching all the discussions that I watch, and some people, oh, why would you suspend prop for a year? Like, what good does that do? It would be the first time in 40-something years where the town would have to follow the same extensive budget process that every other town has to follow by looking at all of the requests, not eliminating X, Y, and Z because it's completely off the table, and evaluating it in a way where they're looking at the whole picture. And I think everyone in the town hall knows that the increase wouldn't be much more than it is now, if more than it is now, because the town will not vote that or approve that. But it also gives the town hall a real idea, because it'll be the first time in 40-something years that the town's people will have a vote that is gauging what the town is willing to pay. So it is kind of a useful tool. And prop is a unique way to limit that stuff. But that type of information is misunderstood or overlooked because it just hasn't been available to think about in 40-something years.
Are there any other questions? Are there any other questions other than Joey?
And if you do,
Let everybody else ask and then,
and
okay,
if
now
you
you
do need
can.
to leave, Amy will step aside, she's not locked in.
Yeah, you're not locked in the building, so go ahead.
It's not a question, it's a comment. The sad part about all this, and going back to the emergency medical, there's plenty of people in town that already thought that we had this.
There's a lot of people in town who have no
Education,
idea.
right?
No idea
Yep.
what any of this is.
I've been in this fire department, or was in this fire department actively for 48 years. And people would come to an open house here and ask me where I slept in this facility.
Yeah.
And it's like, except for a few meetings, I don't sleep here. They don't understand that when you call 911, there's nobody here. It's a process. It's a big process.
So
It
actually,
involves a lot of people.
and a little bit to your point, You were saying earlier how many voters we have in town. There have been over 2,000 new voters moved into town in less than the past 10 years. So if you grow up in a very different place, you have no idea like how a volunteer firefighter department works, because that's not what you grew up with. Again, education.
And it's the fire departments, it's why don't we have curbside trash pickup? It's,
What is it?
Or when are you
Streetlights,
gonna pave my
sidewalks.
dirt road?
where are my sidewalks?
Yeah.
When are you gonna pave my dirt road? It is, what do you
Not my
mean you
dirt
don't
road.
offer an after-school program?
Yeah.
It is, what do you mean you don't offer a gifted program? It is, what do you mean your recreation department is part-time? It's a lot of different stuff that, you know, even people who have been here 20-plus years, because they've been so engaged in their own lives, don't know. They know that in November you vote in some sort of state or federal election, and that if you're from Connecticut, you know that you vote in your budget in the spring. But if you move to Massachusetts, everything's turned around.
So another thing about Woodstock
So-
that people don't realize is the town meeting, not town council government, we're a town meeting government. Less than 6% of Connecticut towns operate under that government structure. So most other towns have a town council that will bring proposals and discuss it like a group between the citizens and the town. We don't, we still rely on, like in the 1800s where the 50 people in town would get together and discuss something. That's still our process, but people don't do that anymore. So we are still the spark of the fire. We still have to bring the issues. Like if you have a concern, you have a suggestion, write a letter, send an email. You as people actually do have more power than we think that we have. That doesn't say that what you want is going to happen, but the more people that voice the same thing forces the town government to look at that thing.
Yes, we could teach that at the academy level.
It'd be nice if we could teach that all the way through.
I don't remember ever hearing any of
No.
that when I was in school.
No, me neither.
No idea, just your parents went and voted.
And then that's when,
It was a long time ago, but.
And that's part of why we're where we're at.
go ahead.
Does anybody have a feel for the demographics in town as far as age groups go? The thing that's going through my mind is that if the schools get this bad, young people are not gonna be moving into town, or go somewhere else.
So,
Okay.
I don't have a very good grasp on that. I do know that I think
There's a
that,
state site, a NECOG.
Yeah.
If you look up NECOG, they have demographics for all the towns in Florida, which has that breakdown.
but I can tell you anecdotally, and this is purely anecdotally, through this process, I've met quite a few families that have moved to town, specifically for education. And it's odd because they're either for elementary school, 8th grade, or the academy. It's like there's a void somewhere in the early middle school age. Although the 5th grade, I think, all of a sudden ballooned. I don't know why.
Because the elementary kids that moved in
That
in the
moved in,
COVID
yeah.
are now hitting middle school.
Good point, good point. But they have been quite surprised by this. Again, this is purely anecdotally, not scientifically. My realtor didn't tell me this. You know, they love Woodstock. The majority of them don't want to change the ruralness of Woodstock. They are surprised by the fire department, but they are not frightened by it. But they do want to know why some of the programs that their children had, either where they came from or what they remember having, aren't available here. Now, I will say too, they don't dislike the education system that we have. They're saying that they like the schools, they like the teachers, they like the environment. They're just surprised by what is not there.
And just to your point, sir, Mr. Diltz at the first meeting said that in past years, when he had an opening for a teacher, he would
Oh, yeah.
get 70-something applicants. Now, they don't get applicants for some positions they post. And part of that is because every year, every new teacher, every series of new teachers goes, I may or may not. You know, and my wife's the lowest one on this totem pole because she keeps volunteering for the hole they can't fill. But she knows that each year, I mean, she's taken 2 positions that didn't exist by the time the school year started. And that week or 2 days before school, they go, Yeah, the library doesn't exist anymore, but we desperately need a 4th grade teacher. Could you do that instead?
And
Okay.
when we're cutting positions, we don't have the increases to keep up with cost of living to pay our teachers either. Oh, I don't know what our pay rates are, but I can't imagine that compared to other, I don't say they're better in any way at this point of the game.
You know, so when we're trying to recruit, that's a hurdle to overcome. And again, like we said, there's nothing that's gonna happen, there's nothing that's gonna happen overnight. But like you said, eventually it's gonna come out that we're not what we are expected to have been. And those folks aren't gonna move here, and it's gonna be another hurdle we gotta overcome, because then you're not gonna have the rates.
But if you're curious about that information, since Amy did say that she's familiar with where to find it, I don't think I'm bad for saying, check with her, because I just don't have that. You had, no, please do, because now I feel bad. Now I feel bad about people laughing. No, you haven't used it up. Maybe some of the questions that you're asking, maybe other people are thinking.
I was gonna make a comment about the transfer station. I go there on Tuesday a lot. It's my opinion that there's too many senior citizens at a discount ticket. I think that's what's holding the transfer station.
I just joined.
So for example, I know that the Board of Selectmen really has some serious discussions about that, because they don't want to price it so high that.
They have gone back and forth.
And they
want your
opinion. Of the weird things that they really focus on, this is one of them. So if you have an opinion about that, any of you have an opinion about this stuff, please let them know, because they don't necessarily want to do this in a void. And this is where I will make a little bit of a stump speech. If everybody here.
Why don't we start serving coffee there?
I know. If everybody here, if we got the numbers at our Board of Ed meetings, and our Board of Selectmen meetings, and our Board of Finance meetings, just from the number of people in this room, it'd be phenomenal. Because it's usually, at least at the Board of Education meeting, you have some teacher representatives and maybe 1 or 2 citizens. At the Board of Finance meeting, you have even fewer, and at a Board of Selectmen meeting, there were 3 of us the other day.
We have 5 people at Board of Selectmen, and we're like, woohoo!
So if you cannot make one of the meetings, and you have something that you want to share, an opinion, a suggestion, I know when I was Board of Ed chair, I would have liked to have heard it, because it will help us make these decisions as well. So good point.
And something else that we can do is offer ideas.
Yeah, and this is the segue. So this is the other part of what this group has done as far as, looking at different ways to actually help the community. Thank you for coming.
When we talk about how would the town function without Prop 46, a concern is, well, what if we pass a budget that makes our taxes go up? I volunteer as municipal agent for the elderly, and part of that is to advocate for the needs of our senior citizens. And so I did some research, because we want to take care of the kids, and we want to take care of the seniors. 80% of the towns in Connecticut have some sort of municipal tax relief for seniors. Woodstock doesn't right now. I have started talking with the selectman about it, and he was very interested in the idea, and there's a few different choices that we have. Pomfret has a tax freeze. It is pretty simple. It just, if you meet these income requirements, you're over 65, this is your primary residence, then your taxes just would not go up. The tax rate, if the mill rate goes down, then they can go down, but they won't go up. Other towns have some sort of percentage of your tax reduction.
And there are state programs available.
There currently are state programs that are run through the assessor's office, so if you're over 65 and you think you might qualify, please call the assessor's office. This is the time to apply. Now through, I think it's May 15th, because then your tax bills go out, so you gotta apply for that. If we adopt a local option, then those 2 programs would run together, and the assessor would be able to kind of take your information and then say, you qualify for this one, et cetera. So that's something that the selectmen can be looking into, and that might come to a referendum and we could vote on it.
And that's something that if you send a letter saying, I support the
Yes.
investigating of a tax break for seniors as a citizen, that goes to the Board of Selectmen, it's noted for the record, and it helps push it along.
And I can say that through Sue's research, there's other forms of tax relief that have come up. This process happened so quickly that it kind of paused our ability to really continue that research before we could bring something to the Board of Selectmen as suggestions. So it's not the only thing. We just haven't had enough time because we've had to pause to do this, to continue our work. Does anybody else have any questions, Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, General Government, Proposition 46, Transfer
town in
Station, DPW, the town in general? Again, if you don't wanna ask out open, please come see one of us, after.
And if you know you have neighbors who might want some of the paperwork, feel free to come and grab it.
I'm sorry, hold on, time out.
So as far as Prop 46, if we were to amend it,
I'm
as
sorry.
opposed to just putting it on hold for a year, if we wanted to amend it, what's that process?
I apologize, 1 second. Hey. All
I
right,
mean, if they were to amend Prop 46,
yes.
what would be the next steps to actually amend it versus just getting rid of it?
So question number 2 is considered the version of an amendment that we have right now. And that amendment would be to suspend it for 1 year.
Oh yeah, I'm talking the future, down the road.
The future, so any actual additional amendments, so say for example, we wanted to, one of the things we looked at was applying the state mandate for secondary education tuition, or specifically endowed academy tuition, because there is a statute that speaks exactly to that. It is either, we would bring that amendment, we, the citizens, could petition for that to be be written into the Proposition 46 and amended that way. Or there's a possibility that it can be brought to the Board of Finance for them to consider. So if we wanted to amend Proposition 46, formally amended to just include EMS and fire, it would be the same process. So it's a couple avenues to be able to do it. You either, this residents petition to do this, I think it's 20 verified electors on the actual petition. Or
And a lot of work.
And a lot of work.
That's one thing,
Definitely a lot of work. Or the example is that the Board of Finance request. Now I have to stress, the Board of Finance voted to do this 5-1. It wasn't unanimous, but it was bipartisan. And the Board of Selectmen did not have to send it to referendum. It was the Board of Selectmen's discretion about whether they wanted to take the request from the Board of Finance and do this. That was a unanimous vote to send number 2 to referendum. And from a personal perspective, this is one of the first, not one of the first times, since it was last considered by the town in the 2015-ish, this has actually been bipartisan. It hasn't been schools versus everybody else. It hasn't been Republicans and Democrats butting heads. It hasn't been the unaffiliated going, what are you guys doing? So to me, and even though I was an insider, I'm not an outsider, it's showing me that this really is a concern. And it is no longer just a concern for the Board of Ed. It has now spread to our fire departments and our town hall.
And I know it's even like with the fire department down the road, if we don't have fire service, your insurance rates are all gonna go up too.
Insurance rates will go up because all of that. And then, of course, if the schools plummet, then property values go down. So everything is interconnected, but if you take a step back and think about it, it becomes very overwhelming. So if we're able to kind of do this in increments, it makes it a little easier.
And didn't you guys do some math or whatever to show that
We did.
the amendment really didn't make as
Yeah,
much of a difference?
Hold on a second. This is a different yellow paper that you guys don't have, but if you went to the open forum a couple weeks ago, you received it. So this group did not just jump to let's repeal. We actually were working toward amendments. And I can tell you that when we all sat around the table and found out what the end result would be for an amendment, we went, oh, you gotta be kidding me. We really thought amending it would take care of the concerns that we have. So what we looked at as far as amending it was to exempt endowed academy tuition because there's a specific state statute that says you must pay it. There's also a state statute that says you must provide EMT fire. So we looked at adding those as, in addition to special education and transportation and debt. Way back in mid-January, back in time, that would have allowed us to only be $500,000 that we had to make up. Now, that $500,000 doesn't mean that $500,000 would be spread across the two places. I don't know what the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, I don't know what that number would be because we didn't do that math at the time. But when we saw that and went, all right, this Band-Aid is only gonna get us, so we're only $500,000 less than we might need, when it really could be more than that. We had to make the collective decision, do we just file a petition for repeal and hope that an educational campaign letting people know what the current status is and how it could benefit the future is the way to go. So our intention to set out was not to repeal 46, it was truly to amend it. But after going through the math gymnastics, the gymnastics analogy, we realized that it wouldn't help. So please know that we didn't just disregard that and go straight to the repeal. We really have been working on this for quite some time. We looked at different ways to amend Proposition 46. And that even became to the point where, I mean, it might get us the money that we need for the EMTs, but it wouldn't get us much more. So that's why I support what the Board of Finance request was after to put together this group. And I know I can speak on behalf, I think, of the whole concerned citizens, that even if it is repealed fully, or even if it does not get repealed or suspended at all, that committee is needed.
Yes.
We really need to do this. And we, the collective we in this room and all our other residents, need to make sure our town officials know that we want them to do it. That we can't just sit here and say we want you to do this and then all go away. Because they're quite busy running the town. So they will need us to support and encourage them, compel them, push them a little bit to do this.
Are we good?
I think so.
If you know anyone who you think would benefit from hearing this again, we have one more session tomorrow night of Bunky Fire at 7 o'clock. So if there's someone else that you think would benefit from this, let me know. Have a great night.
And then, one
It
more.
will all come up again Tuesday night.
Well, that's another important thing. So
Oh, yeah.
Tuesday night is the special town meeting at 7 o'clock at Woodstock Middle School. If for some reason that has to change due to weather, we'll be sharing the information. I'm sure the town will put something out as well. But if that has to change, the timeline for voting a referendum also must change by law. So it will not be March 9th, it will get pushed out as well. So if it is still on for the 28th, please attend. If it is not, just please, double check and stay informed.
Stay informed.
Let's cross our fingers that the 28th happens.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.